First excerpt has a couple of pitfalls in it. First of all, make sure you check the errata on the KMEA website because there are a couple of misprints in this part. For example, there are a couple of notes in there that are off by a step. So if you play the ones that are printed, you will sound very wrong. Don't do that. This first excerpt is a little different from the one for the other 2 years for these instruments, because usually you get a lyrical excerpt and then a faster, higher, louder type of excerpt. The first excerpt for this year's piece is more of a fanfare-ish sort of thing, so it is a medium tempo, play with precision sort of excerpt, not a play every single thing legato. That being said, one of the dangerous parts of this excerpt is that there is very little in the way of dynamic and articulation markings. And so in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth measure of it, there is a section that is unmarked dynamically and with articulations that I play smoother rather than playing in the more marcato style that I play most of the rest of the excerpt. And that's to provide a little bit of contrast in the middle of it so the listener has something of interest in there instead of hearing you pound away at them for a minute straight. Okay, so the third excerpt in this piece is the higher, faster, louder excerpt as per tradition in these auditions. If you are a sophomore and you do this the next 2 years, you will get to have a similar experience. They like to pick something that has a high B flat somewhere in it, so if you can't do that or can't do it well, I recommend hitting some scales and some lip slurs that take you up above the staff, preferably comfortably above the staff. What you want to do when you get to your high B flat is to make sure that it has just as much sound and power as every other note you're playing. There's a tendency on the scale, and I mean it really is a scale. The third measure of this has what is essentially a scale passage up to a B flat and back down. And the tendency is for it to sound like a scale on the first half and sound like rushing air coming through the horn with no sound on the top half. So you need to push that air fast, push those corners of your embouchure forward, and mostly just practice playing up there, because if you haven't done it, it's going to be hard. Something that is not obvious to a lot of young players is that in the fifth measure there's a funky looking marking on the stems of the notes, and that means that you're supposed to play those as 16th notes instead of 8th notes. I'm not sure why the editor didn't just mark them as normal 16th notes, but they didn't, so know that that's going on. In the middle sections of this passage and towards the end as well, there are some triplet figures. On those you're going to want to figure out carefully how you're going to move your slide. Young players are averse to playing D specifically in fourth position. D in fourth is your friend. It's surrounded by E flats and C's in third. It's closer, it's easier, you should do it. But do know that it has to go out about an extra quarter inch farther than your normal fourth position to sound in tune. That'll keep you from cracking all of those D's in fourth. Down the stretch, I don't think this made it into the errata. 3 from the end, there's a high G that looks like it's missing a ledger line, and that's because it is missing a ledger line. It's supposed to be a high B flat, a big fat one, a half note. So again, make sure you're practicing your high range, because that's at the end of the excerpt. You will be more tired playing that one than the one you have to play in the third measure. And then the one last thing to look for is, unlike the first excerpt, it's marked in on this one, but in the middle there's a little more lyrical slurred section. Make sure you play it slurred, because if you keep tonguing it hard when you get there, well, you're gonna sound a little silly. And sounding silly is not the best way to win an audition, so sound good, not silly.
I played the first section of the audition music for trombone. I started at measure 7. I would say one of the pitfalls of playing that section would be students not counting through the longer parts of the notes. So where you have the dotted eighth, 16th notes tied to longer notes, I've found with that rhythm in particular, students not subdividing, not thinking about all the parts of the beat, and then coming in either early or late for the 16th note part. I would say that would be a big concern, something to work on in that particular section.